Hey there, friends, and welcome to episode 279 of Just the Zoo of Us. In a continuation of our dinosaur double feature, this week I am joined by a paleoartist and marine biologist for a review of the ancient giants that towered over the late Jurassic world. We discuss bringing ancient dinosaurs to life with art, puking on company time, paleontology patch notes, the pros and cons of having an inflatable noggin, skibidi gorillas, and so much more. Just the Zoo of Us presents Brachiosaurus with Charles Nye. Hello, everybody. This is Ellen Weatherford with Just the Zoo of Us, your favorite animal review podcast. I'm so excited this week to be talking about an icon. I don't know about y'all, but for me, this is like a childhood favorite, a real classic. I feel like a lot of kids are probably going to be psyched about this one. We have a brand new friend for this week. This is Charles Nye. Say hi, Charles.
Hi, Charles.
Every time it's... I need to stop. I need to stop setting myself up for these, because every time it's like it's never happened to me before.
It's my favorite thing to do. Oh man. Hello, Ellen.
Charles, what are your pronouns real quick?
My name is Charles Nye. My pronouns are he, him.
Thank you so much. We're talking about a real classic, instant fave, gone but never forgotten, R.I.P. But before we talk about our very cool animal for this week, I would like to talk about you a little bit, because you are coming to us from the world of art, from bringing amazing animals to life that we may not have gotten to see in their heyday, bringing these animals to life through art and through illustration. Charles, how did you get into this work doing paleo art?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that a lot of my peers ask me. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a scientific illustrator, and I specialize in paleo art, so that's drawing extinct things. So basically, it's a fancy way of saying that I get to draw dinosaurs and sometimes get paid to do it.
Childhood me is like jaw on the floor right now. Like, that's an option!
Yeah, I was just at my grandma's house, and we were going through a bunch of like old like books and stuff like that, like little clippings and scrapbooks, and we found some really old art that I made for her with crayons and stuff. Oh yeah, over 20 years old at this point.
The validation of every grandma in the world who's like clung to every little drawing and every scrap is like right there, like, yes, that's what I'm talking about.
It stays on the fridge forever. Yeah, right. So it's actually kind of hard to pin how this all happened, because I've always liked to draw. And at some point or another, I realized that people do this professionally. This scientific illustration is a thing people do for money and a livelihood.
Yeah, they got to get in the book somehow.
Exactly, right? Yeah. Like every single textbook illustration you've seen or whatever from high school bio class and on, someone had to do that. Right.
Someone had to get paid for that.
So I had to pay for that. Most importantly, like all that technical stuff, right? You need compensation to have that fidelity of work. So my undergrad institution, Cal State Monterey Bay, actually has a scientific illustration program. And I was like, it was my goalpost for the first 2 or 3 years of my undergrad. So I was like doing all the fundamentals, right? Values and all that, and trying to be like a trained artist. Because up until that point, right, I'd been drawing, but never like gave much academic thought into the process, right? It's all very surgical. And so whenever someone tries to say, oh yeah, you draw because you're talented. No. Drawing, painting, illustrating, all this, it's work, right?
Mm-hmm. You don't draw because you're talented. You're talented because you draw. Like, that is
it's a discipline. Honestly, yeah,
it is,
right?
Yeah.
Like it's like working out at the gym or any other kind of repetitive work, right? So yeah, I gave it some academic thought, got some books, and then immediately after a year, 2 or 3, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this for a living. And I swapped to research, but all those skills are still like my tailwind, so now I do this kind of on the side. I have in every single paper I've published done a graphical thing or drawn elements for it. And so it's a very practical skill, even as like a researcher now. So that's how I got like set up to do this. Everything about like, being able to be on podcasts like this or to show my stuff, that was just luck. It's every day I'm so thankful that people spend time to even just like acknowledge that this stuff exists, because it's a, art, even if it's scientific, even if it's like I made this for a textbook or whatever, there's still a little bit of the artist's own feeling and emotion and time and effort.
Yeah, you're expressing something.
Exactly, right? I'm focusing on something here. It might not be conveyed immediately to the perceiver, but like, everything I make, everything an artist makes, right? There's a little bit of them embedded in that somewhere. So it's been a great time.
What is your research in? What kind of research do you do?
Yeah, so to contrast all of this, as I alluded to earlier, my undergrad institution was California State University, Monterey Bay. And for those of you not from California or the United States, right, Monterey Bay is this lovely cradle of a little ocean pocket in Central Coast, California, perfect for marine biology. And Ellen, I'm a marine biologist who likes to draw dinosaurs.
What a consistency, though. I feel like the Venn diagram between like marine biology enthusiasts and like dinosaur enthusiasts is just like nearly a circle.
You'd be surprised. Actually, yes. And I think there's something to it, and it's the vastness, right? It's the magnitude thing. Right? For the ocean,
like when things are big.
Well, when things are big, right? So in the ocean, you got to think about the ocean as like the big body of water and all the ecosystems, or like big things like giant squids and whales. And for prehistoric things, the Venn diagram, almost a circle.
Make it big. I love it.
We like to look at big things, like to study big things. That's what we're all about here.
We like to feel small. We like to be reminded of our small fragility.
Well, there's a quote from Jurassic World. There are brief moments of genius in that script, and one of them is from one of the characters who said that Jurassic World exists to remind us of how very small humans are, right?
We do like to feel small, I feel like.
Yeah, and just put things in perspective. And so what I study are giant things. I study whales and dolphins, so cetaceans, and I'm a conservation geneticist. And so I use DNA and genomic and genetic data to try to help us better understand things like population health for certain types and species of cetacean and other ocean beings. And I also use this really cool technology called environmental DNA, where I can detect organisms from just taking water samples in their proximity. Wow. And so, it's been very cool to be on a razor's edge on this kind of stuff. So this is completely different from paleo, right?
I feel like there's like knowledge that could transfer between the two, right? Because I feel like having an understanding of the history of the ecosystem and like animals that may have occurred a long time ago and like understanding more about them could help you understand why animals are the way they are now, but also understanding living animals and like knowing how they behave and interact with their world now can also help tell you a lot about how they would have in the past, even if we don't get to see them. Yeah. So like I feel like there is some transfer of knowledge there.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop, right? Like as you said, like that goes both directions. Like in my head, I know we're not going to talk about whales today, but all I think about is whales. I mean, it's funny. So I have friends who visit sometimes at the Oregon coast. So I'm currently a PhD student at Oregon State University. I have friends who come by every so often, and they're like, "Do you want a whale watch?" And I go, "No, I don't want a whale watch." Not because I don't love whales, but because it's kind of work at this point, right? It's
you got to maintain a separation.
Yeah,
you need work-life balance.
And oh my gosh, I don't want to get seasick and not get paid for it.
It's true. You got to be on the clock for that.
Yeah. So
boss makes $1, I make a dime. That's why I puke on company time.
And like honestly though, like the kind of experiences I've been afforded, right, as a marine biologist, as a whale researcher, no whale watching company or nothing will ever compare to the really cool things I've been able to do for the sake of research, right?
I like the idea that like inviting you to go whale watching is like inviting you to go like hang out with your coworkers. You go out whale watching, everyone's like in awe and just like, wow, look at the majesty of the humpback, and you're like, that's Bill.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is funny how we're able to identify the different animals, right, based on characteristics and all that. And sometimes you do just end up learning their patterns of behavior and like, oh yeah, that's most likely this killer whale individual. I don't want to say that I'm not enchanted by whales anymore. There's a lovely hiking path here. We'll get to extinct things soon, but there's a lovely hiking path near where I live where it takes you up like an elevated cliffside next to the ocean. And during the summer, during peak gray whale migration period, you can't look out there and not see 2, 3, 4 spouts popping off. And you just sit there and you stare in awe and wonder. And so even though I don't like whale watching, even though I don't want to do any of that in my spare time, serendipitous encounters, right, are lovely. I've driven next to killer whales on coastal roads here, like parallel, like we're in traffic together, right? It's crazy. So the love is still here.
It's still a whimsical moment because it feels like it's meant for you. Like, this is a treat for you.
Mm-hmm.
And because you mentioned, the fascination with like things that are big. Like, we like when things are big. We like big whales. We like animals that we can see from far away, which is very exciting and cool. And I feel like a lot of that sort of awe is captured in the way that we feel about dinosaurs. I think that really intersects with not just like awe of things that are big, but also the sense of imagination, because we have to fill in so many of those gaps because we just have never gotten to see one alive. So from your perspective as a paleo artist who gets to be the one who like fleshes them out and brings dinosaurs to life, the dinosaur that we're talking about today, Brachiosaurus, which I feel like is kind of one of the first ones like people know about. Like, as a kid, I grew up watching The Land Before Time. I don't know if Littlefoot was specifically a Brachiosaurus, but he was a long neck, which I appreciate how they describe it in the movie as a long neck. So I feel like these like long necked dinosaurs really like evoke a lot from people. Like, there's like a charisma to them. So when you are like, say you're drawing a Brachiosaurus, you're trying to bring one to life in an illustration, what sorts of traits are you like trying to like bring to depictions of Brachiosaurus?
Yeah, so a really important thing, right, when you do paleo art of a very charismatic species is that you don't want to overdo it. There are many kinds of long neck sauropod, but very few have such a distinct silhouette such as Brachiosaurus and its relatives, right? So that silhouette already does the vast majority of work for you. You have this very tall, majestic, sloping back going up towards the heavens, right? And not even just with dinosaurs, right? Like, I was listening to another podcast about giraffes recently and how people have been hyperfixated about giraffes for thousands of years. I think we just like you said, very tall, elegant, giant things, and that's a 20-foot animal. Brachiosaurus is a 45 to 50-foot tall animal, and for those of us
so much bigger than I thought it was,
right? And that's for those of us not living in the States, that is a 12 to 15-ish meter tall critter. So it is as tall as some of my studies whale species are long. So you don't want to mess that up too much, but you also want to convey some modernity to the depiction, right? When we think of sauropods, a lot of people might have a vision in their mind of something slow, meandering, dumb. And if you're a certain generation, maybe sitting in a lake or in the bottom of the ocean, right? Just kind of
passive,
like, sloth in like the biblical sense of just lazy, right? Mm-hmm. But it's the year 2025, and we know at this point that many dinosaurs were not simple, slow, dumb. Really, many animals aren't that way, right? Even the lizards that we keep as pets, right, have moments of like kind of ingenious lucidity, like
a neuron activates right? for a brief moment,
right? Honestly, like animals across the board are a lot more complicated and lovely and wonderful than they were given credit for in the 90s and the 80s and before that, right? But bringing in that splash of modernity, dinosaurs are very visual animals. So a lot of my dinosaurs and my sauropods even have flashes of color. Some of them, many of them, were probably still brown or gray or green, but no reptile, really, when you think about it. This is inclusive of birds. is really that dull of a color, right? They might have earthy tones, but even like things like crocodilians, if you spray them down with a hose under all that mud and algae that they've sequestered, right, are lovely patterns. There's a reason why people use them for like leather bags and stuff, you know?
Yeah, they're gorgeous.
Yeah, so putting in that subtle beauty when there are earthy tones and then putting a pop of some kind of bright color to really sell the point that this was maybe a little bit of column A of the slowness and some of that, cow-like attribute list. But then also you have things like, the kind of energy of like a bird or the showiness of some monitor lizards, right? Or even maybe some of the aggression of some reptiles that we know today. But all these are kind of subtle because I still want to portray what you expect from Brachiosaurus, and that is I'm going to take my sunglasses off and put my hands on Laura Dern's head and move her to look over the side of the car as we both stare up at this thing, right? I always want to capture that wow,
Right, like the towering sense of scale. That's like, I feel like actually one of my favorite sauropod adjacent, and in just a second I'm going to ask you what a sauropod is, so anyone listening who's really confused, don't worry, I'm going to ask.
We got you.
But I have a thought I have to express first.
Hit it.
One of my favorite fictionalized like sauropod adjacent things is the tall necks from Horizon Zero Dawn. Oh, that really hit good. I loved those. I have the Lego set of
fantastic.
The tall neck. I built it. It's, oh my gosh, it was one of the coolest. Like the moment where you first like get to climb one of those in the game is like, I don't know if you've played that game, but getting to the top of one of these tall necks in the game is like, whew, that hits real nice.
I haven't played, but I've watched many a Let's Play of Horizon Zero Dawn, so I'm very familiar with the silhouettes, right? And it's like almost eldritch.
It is,
you
yeah.
know, it's this towering mechanical thing with a satellite dish for a head.
And what's also funny about the tall necks in that game is that they completely ignore you.
Oh, yeah.
Like they don't interact with you in any way. They just continue on about their business, which makes sense for how small you are compared to them. Like you don't stop what you're doing to like investigate a fly on the ground or something, you know, like you're nothing to them.
Yeah. Well, we'll get back to that fly comment. There is a funny note about sauropods, but Ellen, you had a question.
Oh, yes. I did have a question. Okay, so for anybody listening who maybe me a little bit, who is like, you know what does this word sauropod mean? Because you're going to hear the word sauropod when you hear about Brachiosaurus. What's a sauropod?
Yeah, so in dinosaur taxonomy, if I may put on my nerd glasses for a second, there are many major groups of dinosaur. And you can probably imagine them, the distinct silhouettes of each group. You have the ornithischian dinosaurs. These are your Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Parasaurolophus, those guys. The beaked herbivorous dinosaurs. And then you have your Saurischians. And so within Saurischians, that group, we have two major groups. We have the theropods, that is the two-legged, birdy, T-Rex, Spinosaurus, Velociraptor, those guys. And then the other branch of this are the sauropods, which translates to lizard foot. The names here aren't very descriptive in the year 2025. This is kind of holdovers from the 1800s and all that.
I was wondering, the ornithischian seemed like it should go with the one that birds are in.
Maybe at some point we can do a deep dive, because there are some weird things with this grouping and all this. This is the traditional grouping that is still.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
If they were named in a time when we didn't know that like birds belong to this group, maybe they would have named them differently.
It's so strange with the convergent.
We can allow
evolution.
some weirdness.
Yeah, right. So ignore the names. So these are just kind of like the ways we cluster them. But the sauropods are the group of dinosaurs that are all the long necks. All your conventional, your Brachiosaurus, your Dreadnoughtus, your Apatosaurus, the big boys are all here. And this group, herein lies the largest creatures to have ever walked the earth, the biggest terrestrial animals ever. Fine points on it. Not biggest animals ever. That goes to my other my academic mistresses, the whales. Right? That title goes to them. You know, blue whale has yet to be defeated in terms of mass. But for land animals, sauropods take the cake. And that has been true then in the 1800s, and that is true in the 21st century today.
And I feel like if there was a bigger one, we would have found it.
Possibly. Yeah. You know, like, it's funny how in fossil...
It's hard to miss.
Well, fossil preservation is funny because, you know, you would think that the bigger the animal is, the easier it would be to fossilize. But there's like a kind of critical point where there's diminishing returns, right? Like, the size of the fossil then starts to matter. So the bones, some individual bones of a sauropod might be well preserved over time, but the entire skeleton, the chances of the entire thing being preserved in one articulated space, right, is very low for something that is as big as a building, right? As big as a small apartment building. So we have a lot of sauropod bones, but very few full bodies, which is kind of unfortunate because even for Brachiosaurus, there are certain parts of the skeleton that we just don't necessarily have together yet. So while things like Triceratops and T-Rex might be pretty good at being preserved, right, in a mixture of like environment and body size, right, Brachiosaurus and the sauropods, 1 or 2 legs is going to be the same weight as like a small Triceratops, you know?
Oh, jeez. That's true, because then it's like some of those pieces are going to get scattered. Like, they're not all going to stay put. That makes sense. It would be hard to keep the whole thing together. And also with how, I don't know, lanky they are, you know, the head could very well be many, many, many feet away, like dozens of feet away from the rest of the body. So there's a lot of opportunity for things to scatter.
Especially over 100 million years of, like, you know, plate shifting and erosion and all that. You're lucky to get an 80-foot sauropod in like the same kilometer distance as itself. Right. Yeah.
But I mean, we can fill in some blanks, right? You can be like, we don't have the shoulder, but we kind of know what shoulders usually look like. It's probably something like this. Like, as long as they don't suddenly have like a giant 8-foot spike coming out of their shoulder or something really weird like that, you'd be like,
ooh, let's put a pin on that, though.
Know.
Honestly, let's put a pin on that because sauropods, the last 5 or 10 years for sauropod research have been very generous to this group.
Wow.
And I don't think that enough people know about the craziness that sauropods
I don't. I have heard nothing about them since Land Before Time.
Oh, fantastic. Ellen, let me take you on a trip. We're going to focus on Brachiosaurus, but interspersed, we're going to mention some of the supporting cast and some of those implications for even Brachiosaurus. So yeah, buckle up.
Oh, I'm excited. I heard a good bit about like paleontology, like academic drama, like the bone wars and like all sorts of stuff where people can be, like, it can get a little juicy. Paleontology science. So I'm excited about the twists and turns of Brachiosaurus. But if this is anyone's first time listening to this podcast, we rate animals out of 10 in different categories. And the first category is effectiveness, which are traits built into the animal's body, ways that it has physically adapted, tools it has in its kit that let it thrive where it lives, do what it's trying to do, whether it's, you know, get their own food or not become food themselves. Charles, what do you give Brachiosaurus out of 10 for effectiveness?
Well, Ellen, I do believe it's a 10. I'm going to try to be...
Point to me, like, where can you go wrong with this guy?
Exactly, right? I'm going to try to be as unbiased as I can, but honestly, this body plan is stellar. So
it sweeps,
honestly, and yes, genuinely, right? So Brachiosaurus, the name Brachiosaurus means arm reptile, and it's called that because at the time of its discovery, it was one of the only dinosaurs, if not the only dinosaur, known where its front limbs were taller than the hind limbs, which would naturally give it a kind of inclined slope upwards towards the sky, right? Where the spine would be at a certain angle to elevate the rest of the body.
When you said it's an arm lizard, I'm like, the arms are like the least interesting thing going on here. That's not the identifying trait.
At the time it was, sister. At the time it was. In the species name, there's only currently one accepted species of Brachiosaurus. Brachiosaurus altithorax, meaning high chest. So the name altogether, high-chested arm reptile. So everything about this name is very descriptive. So it's a tall boy, is what it translates
giving like
to.
Silverback. It sounds like a gorilla almost.
That's not a bad way to think about it, actually, in terms of its posture, right? But imagine a gorilla being 45 feet tall with a long neck, right? But
I'm sorry, I can't not draw the comparison to Skibidi Toilet.
Oh my gosh!
If like a gorilla was Skibidi Toilet,
if a gorilla was Skibidi Toilet, like there's a pipeline to Brachiosaurus here, you know. What a cursed sentence.
I regretted saying it as soon as it came out of my mouth. I regretted it.
Cursed sentence. But you get the gist, though, right? So if gorillas were Skibidi Toilet, they'd be Brachiosaurus. And this body plan, though, of this natural incline, right, even in the most neutral posture, would allow it to feed on a number of different plant material, right? So not only do you get access to the things you could reach at your feet, you also get access to things you could at least reach at your shoulder. And for the longest time in like the 2000s, 2010s, the prevailing hypothesis was that sauropods could not lift their heads above their shoulder. But in more recent years, we are debunking those hypotheses. And now it looks like that most dinosaurs held their heads as high as they functionally could, because all terrestrial animals today do that. Even if they don't look like it, they are holding their heads up at their maximum, even at resting posture.
I mean, if I saw a giraffe skeleton and I'd never seen a giraffe, I'd also be like, there's no way, because those heads are so heavy. Like, but they do it.
And they do it. 20 feet up. Brachiosaurus doubles that height, almost triples that height, right? But now we've given the sauropods back their groove. So these guys are now legit skyscrapers. You know, and this isn't just for Brachiosaurus. This is across the entirety of all sauropods. There's this nifty little adaptation that scientists found in the hip. So there's a bunch of backbones right above the hip that they found fused together in a certain way that would basically lift the entire backbone at an even sharper angle than anticipated. So all sauropods got a height buff in the most recent paleontology patch. So
patch notes
gave sauropods their groove back, and so
removed height cap from sauropods.
Build limits removed for you sauropoda. So for Brachiosaurus, the neutral posture would have given it like a 30-foot reach. Now we're getting to that 45, 50-foot height once again. And so with this, right, a sauropod like Brachiosaurus could stand in one place and feed for hours without moving a single limb, right? It could clear an entire opening of a forest, walk a couple dozen meters one direction, do it again, and do this for 16, 20 hours a day.
So this very exaggerated sort of height, and also the ability to get even higher, as if that wasn't high enough. Sometimes you just need to get a little higher. What purpose was that serving for the sauropods?
Yeah, so there's something in ecology known as niche partitioning, where if you have a lot of organisms that kind of do the same thing in a habitat, they will, over evolutionary time, evolve different tips and tricks anatomically and behaviorally to avoid taking up the same resource. A good example of this today are shorebirds. For those of us who live near things like marshes, near the ocean, estuaries and rivers and stuff like that, you may notice that there are different kinds of wading bird or shorebird that have different beak lengths and shapes and all of that, and are roughly the same-ish body sizes. This is to artificially separate them by like the depth at which they could put their face in the dirt to get different kinds of shrimpy, buggy things. So the ones with the shorter beaks only go for things on the surface. The longer your beak, the further down you go. And so you can now all happily coexist at the same time or the same place, but you're not fighting over the same resource, which enables all of you to succeed. And this is true now, and this is true back then. So sauropods had a variety of body shapes and sizes. When you think of the things like Apatosaurus and Diplodocus, these were peers of Brachiosaurus, lived at the same time, same place, which was what is now the United States in the late Jurassic, so about 150-ish million years ago. And so this habitat was kind of like if you combine the African savanna and the Pacific Northwest together.
Ooh.
Fields.
I wouldn't think about combining those two things. They seem diametrically opposed.
Right? But like this was before flowering plants were a thing. So the ground cover wasn't grass. It was ferns. So you get savannas and prairies of these ferns, which would kind of superficially look like grass from afar, right? And interspersed between, or these rivers that cut through, and during the wet season, abundance of fluid and tall trees and cycads and all that stuff. And so that is the blend of the Pacific Northwest. Now the savanna part comes in because this was a habitat where you would have very wet and very dry seasons. So when it was booming, it was fantastic. When it was a bust, things were kind of at the razor's edge of life. And so the sauropods in this area had to evolve ways to, min-max, more or less, their ability to eat, right? And so if you are in the dry season, right, you want to avoid eating the same food as your Apatosaurus cousin over there, which, while still tall, was probably only able to get things up to like 25 to 30-ish feet tall. Brachiosaurus, with that extra 15 feet of height, would be able to access vegetation that no other dinosaur in that space, at the time, could reach. And so you could have all these sauropod species living together in the same place, not competing, at least not in excess, for the same food. And during this time, in the USA, in the Jurassic, there were a lot of sauropods. Brachiosaurus is the only brachiosaurid among them, but you had things like I said, Apatosaurus, Diplodocus, Barosaurus, Camarasaurus, the list goes on, all together.
What I wouldn't have given to get a glimpse of just sauropod-covered America.
Don't light a match, though, because you could imagine, if cow farms and fields today smell pretty not great, imagine a whole herd of these guys, tearing down a forest.
No. Grody. But the way that you described, Brachiosaurus having like a longer and longer neck over time to like take advantage of resources that other animals can't, sounds a lot like giraffes. It sounds like kind of a 1-to-1, sort of like giraffes were just like, run that again. Let's try that one more time. It worked really good for Brachiosaurus. Let's see if it'll work for us.
Yeah.
Do they also have 7 neck bones?
Ooh.
Or is it a different neck structure?
Thank you for that question, actually. So giraffes and most mammals have only 7 cervical vertebrae. Cervical vertebrae are your neck bones, right? Sloths have more for some reason, and I don't know why.
Maybe for neck turning? Like
possibly.
For turning heads around?
Yeah,
something like that.
Something crazy. But giraffes, even. But giraffes don't have more vertebrae than we do. They only have 7 as well. Brachiosaurus and other sauropods in that kind of league had 12-ish neck vertebrae. So almost double of what giraffes had, which would have given them a greater degree of flexibility, presumably. But it's just kind of a different way of solving the same problem, right? You either add more neck bones to get a longer neck, or make those individual bones much longer. And mammals just like keeping 7 for whatever evolutionary quirk that entails.
It's probably a lot easier to just make the ones you have bigger than make new ones. Like evolutionarily, like it seems like a bigger jump to like add a new bone.
Yeah, and like mammals are just across the board a bit more conservative, we find, evolutionarily, in terms of like they can get some wild adaptations, but those are like usually things like horns and size and tusks and stuff like that. Some of them in osteoderms. But like, in terms of skeletal adaptations, the weird stuff happens from elongating or shortening certain bones, right? Us weird apes have a very small tailbone that's non-existent externally, right? So we have a tailbone still, we just shrunk it. So yeah, there's that with the giraffe question.
And whales too, right?
And whales only have 7.
We still got the legs, just make them little.
Yep, whales, 7 cervical vertebrae and tiny pelvises inside the body.
Yeah, mammals are like, no, keep it the way it is. Just make it really weird.
Yeah, and over time, evolutionarily speaking, we had a few different groups try this high browsing strategy. Only one of them ever got quite as tall as Brachiosaurus. Don't know if you want to wait for ingenuity to talk about the other replicate groups, but we can wait for that. But yeah, so Brachiosaurus for effectiveness, 10, solid plan, and I must note that Brachiosaurus's group, the bigger evolutionary like cousins that it all shared, the high, tall sauropods, this was the only group of sauropods to make it to the end Cretaceous extinction event that we know of.
So if it hadn't been for that pesky asteroid...
If it hadn't been for the pesky asteroid, you might have been able to see Brachiosaur-like things. Now, Brachiosaurs as a group probably petered out towards the middle late Cretaceous, but its relatives in the greater group known as Macronarians include things like the Titanosaurs. So Dreadnoughtus, Argentinosaurus are all close cousins of Brachiosaurus, whereas all the Diplodocids and the Mamenchisaurs and all those other guys were gone by the early mid-Cretaceous. So this body plan for sauropods persisted throughout the end of the dinosaurs, and that is pretty phenomenal.
They only have one weakness.
Big rock.
Asteroids. Big rock. Weak to rock type attacks,
yes.
Unfortunately.
Yes. Which big Brachiosaurus, like, what's it wouldn't be a fire
Flying type.
Flying type. Just by virtue of the height, it's just kind of... Tropius is grass flying.
Grass flying.
Yes.
So there you go.
If only we're better in like an actual competitive Pokemon.
I always wanted to use Tropius so bad because it's beautiful and I wanted it to be good.
Alas, they should give that one a Mega at some point.
I was clinging to it my entire Gen 3 campaign because I was like, I love you.
I love
There's
you,
nothing I can do with you, but you're great.
Banana sauropod with wings, please stay.
Hey friends, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our friends on the Maximum Fun Network. When we get back, we're rating ingenuity and aesthetics for Brachiosaurus. So stay tuned.
Hey you. Yeah, you with the Gigapet.
Me?
Do you like supporting artist-owned podcasts?
Totally!
What about limited edition gifts, hours and hours of bonus content, and more?
Sounds sweet!
Then stay tuned for Max Fun Drive 2025. www.maximumfun.org on the World Wide Web next week.
Hi, I'm Alexis.
And I'm Ella.
And we're the hosts of Comfort Creatures.
We could spend the next 28 seconds telling you why you should listen, but instead, here's what our listeners have said about our show because really, they do know best. The show is filled with stories and poems and science and friendship and laughter and tears sometimes, but tears that are from your heart being so filled up with love.
A cozy show about enthusiasm for animals of all kinds, real and unreal. If you greet the dog before the person walking them, or wander around the party looking for the host's cat, this podcast is for you.
So come for the comfort and stay for Alexis's wild story about waking up to her cat giving birth on top of her. So if that sounds like your cup of tea
or coffee, Ella, we're not all Brits,
then join us
every Thursday at MaximumFun.org.
Let's talk ingenuity. For anyone who is joining us for the first time, ingenuity is the second category we rate animals on. These are behaviors, things the animal is doing with their body that let them solve problems that they face, thrive in their environment, maybe compete with others or avoid their predators, things like that. Charles, what do you give Brachiosaurus out of 10 for ingenuity?
Well, here's the thing. So Brachiosaurus itself probably gets something like a 7 or 8 out of 10 because it is not the first tall sauropod, nor was it the tallest and biggest of all the sauropods, but for the time, right, in the history of paleontology, when it was first discovered in 1903, it was the biggest dinosaur ever. And the body plan, it was, for its time, the biggest dinosaur with that body plan. But the first brachiosaur ever, as of now, based on my literature review, was from 160 million years ago in France. It is known as, if I may not butcher this French, Vuivria is the genus name of this. Smaller brachiosaur, more in the neighborhood of like 20-ish feet tall, 30-ish feet tall. That's small for a brachiosaur, right?
Yeah, I was about to say, only just a measly 20 feet tall.
Predates Brachiosaurus proper by 10 million years. And this was the first of the group Brachiosaurids that were all the tall boys, right? And so for its time, probably gets the 10, right? It would be the first, from our knowledge, to adopt that body plan and succeed with it. An innovator. But high browsers across the board for dinosaurs evolved a number of times. So we have obviously the sauropods, and within that, the brachiosaurs are the tallest of the sauropods. But even within the other herbivorous dinosaur groups, we evolved some high browsers. So from the things like the hadrosaurs, we got some really, really big hadrosaurs that were like 20 tons, so sauropod weight. Shantungosaurus comes to mind, Magnapolia comes to mind. While not necessarily high browsing, they didn't have long necks. They were just so gosh darn big that they could probably do the elephant thing and knock over trees as they wished.
That's true. You don't have to go to them. You can bring them to you. You can bring those treetops right on down.
Stegosaurs. Now, when we think of Stegosaurus, we think of a short neck, but it turns out that many Stegosaurs have fairly long necks. Not quite sauropod proportion, but longer than you'd expect, which would give them a degree of that same flexibility of staying in one place and being able to get a nice radius of foraging going on. One more group comes to mind for dinosaurs that were high browsers, and that's within the theropods. The therizinosaurs, those weird scythe-handed Freddy Krueger dinosaurs. For Jurassic Park fans, Jurassic World fans, this was the Freddy Krueger dinosaur from Jurassic World Dominion. And so these guys evolved to be, a pretty respectable height, anywhere in the ballpark of like 20 to 30-ish feet tall, and had a long neck. So high browsing was an effective strategy for dinosaurs. And then even later on, after the non-bird dinosaurs went extinct, we had things like Paraceratherium, the giant rhinoceros relative that looks like a sauropod just with a shorter neck, right? A sauropod and a rhino had a baby and had a much shorter neck, but also was just titanic in size.
Looks like something out of Star Wars. I did a quick Google.
Oh yeah, they
looks
actually
like a Star Wars thing.
So they actually used Paraceratherium as a reference for the walkers in Star Wars.
Oh,
yeah,
I see it.
Yeah.
I see it.
You see the vision, right?
Yeah, I see it. It's there.
Yeah,
they're really cool.
they
I
are
think they're
awesome.
kind of cute.
You can imagine, right? Those ears,
cute.
right? Just coming down with a big blocky hair for you to love on it,
It's a good Google.
It's a good Google. Look up Paraceratherium if you don't know what that is. So that's another example of high browsing. Elephants and other proboscideans do high browsing from their trunks. And then obviously giraffes do high browsing. So this strategy has popped up a number of different times across the animal kingdom. But sauropods did it, if I may, first and the best ever. Right? They fully dedicated to the bit.
The goats.
Actually, yeah, though we think about it, there are very few derivations from the big body and tall neck body plan of sauropods. There were a few weird ones here and there that didn't quite subscribe to that body plan and had their own thing going on, but those are the exceptions to the otherwise gigantic rule.
Since you did mention that, Laura Dern, turn your head, whoa, here's this big field full of dinosaurs. Did they travel in herds? Is this something we know, or were they just riffing in the movie?
So for Brachiosaurus proper, we have no direct evidence for it traveling in herds, but that's mostly because Brachiosaurus is relatively rare in the fossil deposits that they are found in, and that could be for one of a myriad of reasons. But other sauropods, yes, were herding animals, and depending on the species, they could either be mixed herds, like when you think of mammal herds today, with babies, juveniles, and adults all coexisting. But there's also evidence that certain sauropod species had age-separated peer groups. They hung out with their own age size. We don't know if that is a thing like elephants today, where the males, after a certain age, get outcast from the herd and hang out as kind of bachelor groups together, right? That's something elephants do. We don't know if it's, just hatchling cohorts that come together, or independent sauropods that are all hey, we're all the same-ish age, let's band together and grow up together. So sauropods did herd. The mechanisms and the intricacies we'll probably never know. But yes, asterisk. So they most likely did move in herds, but for Brachiosaurus proper, we have nothing to suggest that it didn't, but also nothing that's concrete, right? Good proof of that, good evidence for that would be a bone deposit of dozens of Brachiosaurs together, right? Of all age groups or the same age class, whatever, right? So that would be the smoking gun.
I was thinking about my first thought was, these things are so massive, they might not want to travel in a herd because then you're going to strip all the trees and there's not going to be enough for everyone to eat. But then I thought about, we have so many large herbivores now that travel in herds, and it doesn't seem to hurt them, right? Like they seem to be just fine. You've got rhinos and elephants and stuff that travel in herds. And then I was thinking about how giraffes, travel in herds, but how male giraffes can, be kind of territorial against each other, and they can kind of fight and stuff, famously whipping their heads around like a flail to fight each other. And then naturally the next thought is Brachiosaurus fighting each other with their heads just like a mace, like they're like just spinning it around like a flail. And because they, like you said, they're more articulated, right, than a giraffe neck. So it's more like a rubbery, like a sling almost.
As amazing as that thought is, unfortunately, I don't think the skull of Brachiosaurus was reinforced enough. So for listeners who don't know what Brachiosaurus head looks like off the top of your imagination, it looks like a dinosaur head. Right, very descriptive of me. But the most distinguishing feature of Brachiosaurs is this tall nasal crest, right? So their nasal bone extends from the back of their head all the way up maybe the midpoint of their snout, and it makes this kind of a squarish, almost triangular crest. And in life, that'd be like kind of an inflatable air sac or some kind of like fleshy muzzle, right? But that is a thin strip of bone that goes from the back of the head to the front of the head, and it's not particularly reinforced. So unlike giraffes, who use their heads as the actual point of impact for when they're fighting, they also hit their necks, but if you look closely at two male giraffes fighting, they're trying to use those horn-like structures at the back of their head to pop, pop, pop each other.
Yeah.
But good point, though, about sauropods fighting. Another related but not closely related group of sauropods, the apatosaurs, so Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus, have very reinforced neck vertebrae on the underside. They have these kind of like anchor points. The way I like to describe it, it's like a Toblerone chocolate bar. where the base of it would be nice and flat, right? And be this thick triangle in cross-section. And some scientists hypothesize that those guys were probably using their necks to do the brutal smashing of their bodies against each other. This is known as the Bronto Smash hypothesis.
Bronto Smash.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Coming next to Super Smash Brothers.
Brontosaurus! And there's our first copyright strike of Just the Zoo of Us right there for you.
I mean, they could have done a snake sort of constrictor, like wrap around, choke each other out sort of thing. Like,
that actually, I would consider that
they
more...
look way too strangleable.
Exactly. But when you think about it, well, actually, let me introduce this thought to you guys. We might move to aesthetics for this point, because sauropods were a lot less toothpicky and noodly as one might have expected, mostly because they were full of air.
Okay, so you did a minute ago say that the nasal crest could have been an anchor for an inflatable sack, which is hilarious to me. We did gloss over it. I definitely didn't miss it because it was a very funny mental image. It also reminded me of in Prehistoric Planet, the Dreadnoughtus.
Yep. Slump,
that was so
slump.
fun. I loved that.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Let's get into the aesthetics, because this is fascinating. Yeah.
This is the last category we rate animals on. It's just how nice this animal is to look at. As someone who draws them for a living, I feel like nobody has a more informed perspective on aesthetics than a professional. But what do you give Brachiosaurus out of 10 for aesthetics?
It's gotta be 10, Ellen. I know I said I wouldn't be unbiased, but here we are with the most biased answer I can give. But honestly, Brachiosaurus is kind of the sauropod to a lot of people, right? That's funny.
It's the guy. I'm him.
It's them. There they are, right? But a lot of people I talk to actually misconstrue it as Brontosaurus, right? Like, or they'll even say like Brachiosaurus. So it's like almost there, champ. Almost. Brachiosaurus is the one you're thinking about, the tall guy in Jurassic Park, right? Ooh.
Well, Brontosaurus was made more famous by The Land Before Time, I feel like.
Littlefoot is an Apatosaurus thing, kind, whatever. I'm sure they don't actually have a defined, like in the show notes.
That's probably why they just call them long necks. They're
generic sauropod.
We're not gonna.
It's fine. It'll work. But it's got to be a 10, right? That iconic silhouettes. the nostalgia lots of people have for that scene in Jurassic Park. It just kind of embodies everything that we love and admire about that prehistoric world. We will never see things this big ever again, right? This is a bygone era that we are very fortunate now as bipedal monkeys with big brains to even interpret and register as a reality that once was, right? And that is the sentiment and all that. But on a much more scientific course, the aesthetics for sauropods have gotten a nice touch-up in the last 5 to 10 years, right?
The yassification of sauropods.
Yes, and they've been criminally underused. You might think of sauropods, you know, all those guys with thin necks and then kind of a big, robust body. Turns out the entire thing might have been a big chunker in and of itself.
I love it. I love it.
like those necks were probably quite burly in and of themselves. I'm not saying this thing looked like a tube, but I am saying that you're probably underestimating how much meat was on these things. But also,
you ever buy smoked sausage at the store?
give it some legs and then make some like ooh sound effects, and there you go, right? No, but seriously, I was, for art practice, we call this redlining, where you take a photo or whatever and just try to replicate the base shapes and like some vague skeletal features, right, of your subject, to try to see like what, if I were to replicate this, how this would look. I did this for Jurassic Park 3's Brachiosaurus, and while the body is very sufficiently robust, that neck and head is just way too thin and also shorter than the actual fossil specimens would suggest. So all the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World sauropods you've seen have been underselling the size and the craziness that things can get to. Like Brachiosaurus, like I said, got a height buff in the most recent patch, and all sauropods also got a skin covering as well. So again, I hate poking holes in the Jurassic franchise, but they perpetuate this the most. It's part of the character design philosophy, right? Where all the plant-eating dinosaurs are kind of this wrinkly, elephantine, kind of saggy appearance, whereas the theropods, the meat-eaters, get like the wild, like spikes and horns and stuff like that. In reality, it's kind of the other way around, where the theropods might have had feathers, might have looked a bit more birdy and all that, but smoother. Whereas every single group of herbivorous dinosaur has gotten some wild spikes and scutes and quills and all these other strange adaptations, right? Sauropods included. So the group that Brachiosaurus is a member of, the Macronarians, which includes Titanosaurs, Dreadnoughtus, Argentinosaurus, that group of dinosaurs has evidence of what we call osteoderms. These are elements in the skin, embedded in the skin, that are bone. Crocodilians have them today. Giant ground sloths had them too, which is insane.
Also R.I.P. Also gone but never forgotten.
Another high browser that I forgot to mention earlier, giant ground sloths. But yeah, just these deposits of bone that pepper the skin as either functional armor, as nutrient reserves, or, you know, any combination of the two. And so it's very possible that Brachiosaurus and its relatives might have had similar spiky features at some parts of the body. And there's a specimen of a baby Diplodocus, which is that kind of a long group of dinosaurs, that has a number of different scale types preserved in terms of like impressions along where it was found. And instead of like wrinkles and kind of this homogeneous thing, depending on where you're looking at the body, these scales could be like the belly scales of a crocodile. They could be these kind of like asphalt pavement kind of texture. And like, it's wild of the diversity of skin coverings sauropods had just based on those couple points of evidence, right? And now superimpose that on something that weighed 50 tons and was the height of an apartment building. What kind of nonsense would you be looking at? Would it even be safe to touch it?
Oh.
You know, or would you like scrape your hand on sharp scales by like walking too close to it, right?
It does seem like I would expect, first of all, that the size itself would be a deterrent for predators,
100%.
right? That the size would just be like, oh, that thing's too big. No, there's no way. But also, I mean, you're not going to be that big right out the gate, right? You got to be little for a while first. Mm-hmm. So it would make sense for them to have something else in their kit, you know, like spiky skin or just straight up spikes, like something to help protect them when they're not 50 feet tall.
Right,
Yet.
right. And that would take them most of their life to get 50 feet tall. For the majority of a brachiosaur's life, it was, they grew really quickly, right? Reaching a reproductive size, well before their teens, but they wouldn't reach that full size until like age 20-something or 30. And most dinosaurs that we know of, based on fossil evidence, didn't live much longer than age 30. So they reached the terminal size kind of at their golden years. So for the entire rest of that period, they're prey for Allosaurus, for Torvosaurus, for Ceratosaurus. They are trying their best to maybe herd together. Maybe they had spikes. Maybe they had some kind of defensive, tails out position or something, right? But the more you learn about, especially the herbivorous dinosaurs, the more just interesting aesthetically they become. We think of feathers as only a bird thing or a bird line dinosaur thing, but in other groups, we see quills pop out of kind of nowhere, evolutionarily speaking. So it's entirely possible Brachiosaurus had this kind of decked out appearance of like sharp scales, right? And the males might have had quills coming out the back of the head, flashy colors during the mating season, right? And maybe tussling with one another. I do want to go back to the point about the air, though, and the bulkiness, right?
Yes.
I did mention that the weight of these animals might be 50-ish tons and all that. Anywhere from 20 to 50 tons is a reasonable estimate. And part of that weird error bar is the fact that sauropods were full of air. Their bones were hollow, full of these chambers and pockets of air sacs. They likely had a bird-like air sac breathing system. And all of this served to lighten the skeletal load while still retaining structural integrity. So
that makes sense, because that was I was thinking about that, like being an animal living on land, there's got to be some sort of critical mass.
Yes.
Like a point where you're like too heavy to survive.
Yes. And for a long time, people thought that sauropods lived underwater or had to because of this. But then, as science marched on, these air sacs became more prominent and thought about in the literature, and these lighten the load considerably for sauropods, both on a functional, they weigh less kind of overall, and also in a mechanical sense where they have to move less in order to get to that maximum size. So while still an objectively large creature, they weigh significantly less than, say, a mammal at that volume. And so the biggest sauropods might have tapped out at anywhere from 60 to 80 tons, but that would be it for the terminal size, because otherwise any bigger and you're coming across some wild biomechanical issues. If you think your joints are bad now, right, as people, as we approach or get into your 30s, kids, you start noticing things go wrong. Now imagine that on a Titanic scale.
You imagine one of those getting up in the morning that the snap, crackle, pop.
I'm imagining an old brachiosaur, right, in a cool morning in the rainy season, lifting its head up, and you hear 12 pops as it kind of brightens itself up and gives a big
and since
yawn.
It's an old man, it's like, ugh.
But instead of you hear this beautiful melodic ooh across the
But
field.
to them, it sounds like ugh.
There goes old man Jim again, out of his clearing and getting up in the morning.
But I do like the idea of them having a little balloon just sitting right on top of their head.
Entirely what that was for, right? And possibly, right? It might have had a dual function, right? That big empty chamber in there could have been for producing sound. It could have been for cooling the brain by having it a lot of blood vessels there, right? Directly close to the brain. So whenever it inhaled, right, cool air, it could cool parts of its body with countercurrent exchange. All of these things were probably true to some extent. But the inflatable sac component is something I cannot get rid of in my head.
Hilarious.
Even if it's a little subtle, right? I'm not imagining it being like a balloon, but even it's a little bit of a subtle expansion as it breathes in. Something that lives rent-free in my head. Just
I'm going full balloon. That's hilarious to me. Because that helps them pick their head up. They just blow it up with air and it just zip. Yeah, like up.
That's really funny, actually. It's a
floats their
funny
head right
visual.
up.
I'm gonna keep that in mind for maybe a D&D monster at some point.
But also, unfortunately, tragically poppable.
Tragically poppable. Yeah, that could be in bird and avian ornithology, veterinary practice and medicine. The puncturing of an air sac is a pretty bad situation for a bird to be in. mostly because then that inhibits their ability to fly and their maneuverability, but also the air sac system, depending on where you pop it, is tied to the respiratory tract. So you joke, but honestly, these things may have been glass cannons if you get the right part of the body. Allosaurus in its time was capable of doing incredible damage. The thing is steak knives on 2 legs. So perhaps that's all you need to do to bring down a sauropod.
Knife go fast.
Knife go fast, right part of the body, and then it deflates, basically.
Oh no, it's a big inflatable.
Basically, right? Like if you get the right part. Now, I don't know if that's actually how it would work out for a sauropod, but can't imagine it'd be a good thing if an air sac part got punctured. And so these
Don't want
guys,
that.
yeah, right. And then this points to how evolution makes, or at least guides. There's no direction for evolution, but the solutions for these biomechanical issues, right, are imperfect because life is just trying to pass on to the next generation. And these solutions to decrease weight and all these other things may work, right, to get you to a massive body size, but then you got to think about, how are you going to feed yourself? What happens if you get punctured? And sometimes there is no solution to that if you reproduce before you die,
The solution is don't.
The solution is don't, but clearly Brachiosaurus and its closest relatives were able to keep on going to the very end when that giant rock popped all of their balloons and they all
That's
went
true.
extinct.
That's why they're part flying type, is because of all the air.
Because of all the air in the balloons, right? So that Dreadnoughtus in Prehistoric Planet, right? Yeah, you got all those crazy air sac display features down the neck, plausible for Brachiosaurus as well. These things may have looked as alien as you could possibly envision. I stray a little closer to a bit more of an expectations grounds, just merely from my own aesthetic interpretation, because that's also equally likely as something crazy. But yeah, if you are a budding paleontologist or paleoartist or enthusiast in dinosaurs, I would encourage you to look into some of the newer sauropod scientific literature and stuff like that, because the depictions that you're familiar with and what I'm familiar with and maybe a little too comfortable in might be doing a disservice to this entire group that, could have been as varied as birds are today in terms of their visual pizzazz. It's clear across dinosaurs that they all had visual display components, and so through evolutionary time, that can make some wild things happen.
And also for anybody who, is maybe developing a budding interest in paleontology, or maybe already has an interest in paleontology and is looking for more content about paleontology, could you talk about Project Paleozoo?
Yeah, I can talk about Project Paleozoo. Listeners, you have heard from Christian Flores already about Project Paleozoo, but if you haven't already, a group of artists, creators, and educators, including of myself, have band together to create kind of our own Jurassic Park book. And it's not like a narrative, it's more like we envision this as a book that you would pick up from a zoo in the souvenir shop. That's kind of like the overview of the zoo. Project Paleozoo is that manifested together. The book's title is Artemis Paleozoo, and that's the name of the fictional zoo as well. And this is a fake place that we've dreamt up where we're taking you through a modern prehistoric animal zoo. Think of it as kind of like sister media to things like the Dinosaur Sanctuary manga series you might have read or have seen or heard of, or Prehistoric Kingdom, that really awesome park builder sim game. We love and we are inspired by these new efforts to portray dinosaurs and prehistoric critters as animals. Wonderful, mysterious, gorgeous, fascinating, fearsome, but just animals. They are not crazy kaiju, right? Though sauropods might push that envelope a little bit, right? We have 2 sauropod species in Artemis Paleozoo. We have Europasaurus, which is a brachiosaur, a small species of brachiosaur that only got maybe about 12 to 16-ish feet tall, only, so got to giraffe size, right? But still kept that same kind of profile. And we have Dreadnoughtus, the same gigantic sauropod that was in Prehistoric Planet and Jurassic World Dominion. We only have 3 of those in the zoo, though, because you could imagine each adult sauropod weighs as much and probably eats as much as a small group of elephants does. So all of these things were so fun to put together. And so this book is an overview of this fake zoo. We talk about the fake programming. There's a fake coffee menu for the fake cafe that I made up. right? It's just a fun little thought experiment manifested as an art book where we have illustrations for many of our species. I think we have well over 60 species of prehistoric animal represented in this book across dinosaurs, ancient insects, prehistoric mammals. You name it, we have a representative from that clade.
It does scratch the itch that I always got watching things like Jurassic Park, where it was always like, yeah, okay, but I want to see this, but everything goes fine.
Yeah, I wish Jurassic World gave me more of that. Like, my favorite parts of Jurassic World are the bits where you see the Jurassic World functioning, where people
yeah,
are in
like, I
line.
want to see this, but everything's fine.
Right? Like, give me like an Office series, but it's the Jurassic World employees, where everything goes fine and there's some funny hijinks, but like, come on, we've seen what happens when dinosaurs get out. Oh, devastation. Ooh, ah, yes.
Yeah.
And then there's the running and the screaming, right?
And you're like, but what if?
But what if things go right?
What if?
Yeah, so Project Paleozoo is that what if things go right? And we also want to share a different lens of relationships of people and wildlife, right? I'm speaking as the project manager. I'm the kind of lead editor and project coordinator for Project Paleozoo. The kind of lens we want to shoot for this is, in the past, even the last couple decades, right? The depiction of animals has changed from must kill, right? Movies like Jaws don't really come out anymore today.
Right.
And if they do, there's a very conscientious effort by the producers to make it, a monster shark or something crazy and, supernatural. Very rarely do you come across a movie or media that has you just kill a lion just 'cause, right? We want to perpetuate that because humans I'm going to be on a soapbox real quick. We need to treat wildlife better. It's 2025. We know climate change is a thing. We know we are in an extinction event. We know that we are losing biodiversity every year. And the public can't really ingest all of that information in an academic sense because they're too busy doing what they're doing in their jobs and actual careers. I get paid to think about this kind of stuff. So how do you convey these themes in a way that's, a bit less in your face or a bit less, do more? This is a way to be like, zoos today treat animals this way. It is kinder, positive reinforcement, all these wonderful things that we know now, right? And how do we treat wildlife today? What's the point of a zoo today? It's not just to take a selfie of an elephant. It's to fund conservation projects. It's to make the public aware of species and places in the world they haven't even thought of since grade school or something. So we hope to bring a positive attitude to that, using dinosaurs and prehistoric animals as a vector for that kind of feeling, because we all love animals in this project together. Christian Flores is a keeper of reptiles. He is a wonderful man and a zoological consultant. We have consulting paleontologists. Many of us are involved in environmental academia. I'm a PhD student in marine biology, right? We want to share this with people, this love of nature that is something that's sort of our responsibility as people to manage, because a lot of this is our fault. And you could say, it was 50 years ago or whatever, or 100 years ago. That's all very true. But the mess is still here. Mm. And I would love it if my descendants could see wild elephants, could see wild whales and all that because of the efforts put in today. So that is Project Paleozoo in a nutshell. We hope to have it out later this year. You could follow us at Project Paleozoo on Instagram and Blue Sky. We still have a Twitter for archival reasons, but we do not post there anymore. And yeah, keep in tune with us there. It's been kind of my love child with this group of people. Like we've poured in so much attention and time and energy into this, and so we're happy to share it with you when the time comes.
The people yearn for wholesome dinosaur content.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah.
There's such a gap, because dinosaur content is always so, I don't know, action-y, and conflict-driven and harsh, and it's all focused on, oh no, the scary predators are coming for us. I feel like there's the people yearn for just cozy, wholesome dinosaur content.
Yeah, there's a section at our Artemis Paleozoo, like like how in zoos you have the Africa Trail or whatever. Artemis Paleozoo has a section called Tooth and Claw that is entirely dedicated to just being like predatory animals are just animals, and
Yeah.
The opening kind of spread you see for that is a bunch of sleeping coelophysis in a cuddle pile together.
Oh.
Because you're absolutely right. We don't get to see dinosaurs behaving just like animals, or even a little cuter, right, than, usual. Right, Prehistoric Planet did a little bit of this, but we want to push that to show in zoos, in modern good zoos, animals are here living good lives to scientifically prescribed care, right? So you're going to see animals getting enrichment. There's a T-Rex playing with a tetherball, right? There's a Dreadnoughtus kicking a little ball in the water, right? There are bits like this where it's like, hey, they're going to play, they're going to have fun like you see at a zoo today. So we hope that we help fill that niche and we get things like Dinosaur Sanctuary, Prehistoric Kingdom, Paleo Pines, these other media bits are showing up, trying to paint dinosaurs in a different light. And I hope we can be part of that that wave.
It feels like an important part of bringing animals to life to show them in moments of joy and show them in moments of happiness and in moments of rest.
Right.
Like the moments that like fill out the life, right? Like life isn't all hunting. You're not going to be hunting 24/7. So like I feel like that's an important part of like really showing the animal as it would have been in life in their moments of warmth.
Peace, right? And contentment, right? Like that's whenever I go birding, right? It's exciting to see an eagle take down like a groundhog or something. That happens maybe once a year if you're lucky and you're out there pretty often, right? Predation events are rare in nature for us to observe. Documentaries make it seem like it happens all the time, and it probably does happen, or it does happen to, a degree of frequency. But, most of the time animals are resting, they're sleeping, they're socializing, right? So we hope to capture that. We want dinosaurs to kind of champion these ideas and kind of seed this attitude for the next generations of dino enthusiasts.
And for the next generation of dino enthusiasts that wants to follow along with your work and see more from you, where can people find more of your work on the internet? Where can people go next?
Yeah, so they could find me at The Paint Paddock on Instagram and Blue Sky. I also have a WordPress, thepaintpaddock.wordpress.com, that I haven't updated in a while because, managing a website is kind of in the back of my mind with the PhD and Paleozoo and these other things. But you can follow me there. I'm well active on both platforms. Any inquiries can go to thepaintpaddock@gmail.com for things like commissions, partnerships, and things like that. I've been an invited speaker to California Academy of Sciences, worked with museums before for art workshops. So this has been a very fun component of like SciComm and outreach and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I have had a lot of fun learning a lot more, gaining a deeper appreciation of like, it feels like a childhood friend this animal is. I really appreciate like getting more insight into what their world would have looked like. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being here and talking to us about Brachiosaurus.
Thank you, Ellen. It was a pleasure.
We'll talk to you later. Bye. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope that these ancient giants have left behind great big footprints in your heart. If you liked what you heard today, I hope you leave behind some kind words for us in a review on your podcast app of choice. If you would like to hang out with us online, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, Blue Sky. Links to everything will be in the episode description. Especially recommend following now if you haven't already, since next week kicks off the Max Fun Drive, and there's always a ton of fun stuff happening on social media. So go follow us there if you haven't already. You can also send me an email at ellen@justthezooofus.com if you have a cool animal you'd like to hear us talk about on the show. We would like to thank Maximum Fun for having us on their network alongside the other amazing shows on their network, like the ones that you heard promos for here today. You can go check those out, learn more about the network, and how you can be a part of supporting our show over at MaximumFun.org. Finally, we would like to thank Louis Zong for our theme music. That's all for today. We'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
Supported
directly
by you.